The rain lashed against Lila Marlowe's windshield as she turned onto the tree-lined suburban street, wipers slapping back and forth at a steady, tired rhythm. It was 8:15 on a Tuesday evening, and she had left her downtown marketing office later than usual. Ethan had texted an hour earlier saying he would be stuck working overtime, so she had grabbed takeout tacos and driven across town to his townhouse, planning to drop off his dinner and surprise him. She had not called ahead. The 3-bedroom townhouse glowed warm behind dark, rain-streaked windows. She parked at the curb, grabbed the paper food bag from the passenger seat, and hurried up the concrete steps, her boots squelching on wet pavement. Ethan had given her a spare key months ago. She unlocked the front door quietly, half expecting the space to be empty. The lights on only because he had forgotten to flip them off before leaving. Soft music drifted out from the upstairs hallway. Lila froze in the entryway. The low indie track was one Ethan claimed he rarely listened to. She set the taco bag down on the small wooden console table by the door, her heartbeat picking up. If he was supposed to be at work, no one should be upstairs playing music. She slipped off her damp jacket and hung it over the banister, then climbed the carpeted stairs slow enough that her steps barely made sound. The bathroom door stood slightly ajar. A crumpled silk camisole she did not recognize lay draped across the edge of the sink counter. A tube of expensive lip gloss sat beside it, the brand something Lila had never owned. Further down the hall, Ethan's bedroom door was pulled halfway shut. Voices filtered through the gap, low and relaxed. Not the tense work call tone she was used to hearing from him. She leaned forward, careful not to push the door open. Jessa's laugh floated out first, light and easy, followed by Ethan's quiet reply. Lila's stomach twisted. Jessa was his roommate, the woman he had described dozens of times as being like his little sister. They signed the lease together 14 months ago, and Ethan always brushed off every one of Lila's small words. Just family, he would say. Nothing. Lila knocked once on the door. Inside, the conversation cut off instantly. Ethan pulled the door open wider, his face caught off. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, hair-messy. Behind him, Jessa sat on the corner of bed, already grabbing a hoodie to pull over her shoulder. Her cheeks were flushed. Neither of them had expected anyone to What are you doing here? There was panic under her voice, not simple surprise. I told you I had to stay late at the office. Yours. Lila's eyes moved past him, sweeping him. Her gaze landed on the stand. Ethan's secondary old phone lay face up, the screen partially lit. A fragment of a text message was visible, sent from Jessa. I wish you didn't have to lie to her all the time. The rest of the line was cut off by the lock. Jessa stood from the bed, hands stuffed into the pockets, trying for a casual. Hey Lila, I didn't know you were coming tonight. Lila barely reached her. She kept Ethan. You said you're at work. You texted me 45. Ethan stepped out of the hallway and pulled the bedroom door closed most of behind him, creating a thin barrier between Jessa and the three of them. His tone shifted fast from startled to defensive. Okay, I got out early. I came home. Jessa was having a rough day, so we hung out for a little while. That's all this is. Hang out? Lila nodded toward the hall. There is women's clothes in your bathroom. Her bed. And the phone. Her voice started to shake, even as she fought to hold it steady. People who are just brother and sister like this. Ethan. That isn't what I think it is. Ethan raised both hands, placating, the same way he responded every time she brought up uneasy. She really is me. She went through a terrible winter. I cannot just shut her out of my life. We live under the same roof. Boundaries get blurred sometimes, friends. Boundaries. Lila repeated the words flatly. She thought back over months of dating. Group dinners where Jessa Ethan's side. Weekend plans Ethan made with Jessa to tell her about. The little jokes only the two of them shared that Lila might join. All those moments she had pushed away, telling herself she was being jealous and unreasonable. Every small red flag stacked up in her moment. Jessa opened the book again. Her voice almost gentle. I hate that this looks bad. I would never you to. Lila did not respond to her. She could not bring herself to Jessa right now. All of her focus locked on Ethan. She wanted him to deny the text, to explain away the camisole, to give her one believable reason she could hold on to, so she did not have to accept what her eyes were showing her. But he never addressed the actual evidence. He only circled back to the same argument over and over. She was misreading things. She was overreacting. Jessa was like his sister. Rain continuing against the roof above them. Somewhere the refrigerator hummed. The atmosphere in the upstairs hall was thick, heavy, like the bad storm. No one raised their voices. Everything had already broken. Worse than shouting. Lila turned and walked back toward another argument. She did not grab her jacket. She left the forgotten taco takeout entryway table. Ethan called her name from behind her, begging her to stop, asking her to before she drove off. She kept walking. Outside, cold rain hit her bare. She hurried to her car. She climbed the car door shut. The engine rumbled to life, did not pull away immediately. She sat there, windshield moving slowly back and forth, staring toward the windows of the townhouse. Somewhere behind his panes were Ethan and Jessa, two people she thought she understood. A quiet future Lila had pictured. Trips, holiday visits, slow steps, and something permanent with Ethan, apart right in front of her. She could things she had witnessed tonight. She could not pretend the text message flashed across that phone screen. The only question spinning inside her head was how large the lie really was, and how much a relationship had been built on it. The drive back to her apartment felt endless, rain streaking the windows until the streetlights blurred into soft golden smudges. Lila drove on autopilot, her hands tight around the steering wheel, her mind replaying every second of the scene at Ethan's townhouse on loop. The unbuttoned collar, Jess's flushed cheeks, the half-visible text burning into her memory. None of it lined up with the innocent sibling bond Ethan insisted existed. By the time she pulled into her apartment parking spot, her shoulders were knotted with a quiet, simmering anger that replaced her initial shock. She didn't answer any of Ethan's calls that night. 3 missed calls and a flood of pleading texts piled up on her lock screen, all begging her to come back, to let him explain, to not leave things broken between them. Lila tossed her phone on her nightstand face down, stripped out of her damp clothes, and collapsed onto her bed, too drained to cry. For 21 months, she'd loved Ethan wholeheartedly, overlooked tiny inconsistencies, excused his distant moments, and dreamed of a shared future. Now every generous choice she'd made felt like a foolish mistake. The next morning brought gray, overcast light, and a fragile, forced calm. Lila sipped cold coffee at her kitchen counter and typed out a single clear message. "I'm not doing this over text. I'll meet you at the downtown cafe on 5th at noon. We need to talk honestly, no more excuses." She hit send before she could second-guess herself, determined to get concrete answers instead of the vague reassurances he'd hidden behind for months. Ethan replied within seconds. "Desperate and agreeable, I'll be there. Whatever you need, just please listen to." The cafe was busy for a weekday lunch rush, filled with clinking mugs, quiet office chatter, and the soft hiss of an espresso machine when Lila walked in. She spotted Ethan immediately, seated at a corner table, his hands folded tightly in front of him, his expression tense and exhausted. He'd dressed casually, like he'd rushed over straight from his work, and his eyes lingered on her face the second she stepped through the door. Lila slid into the seat across from him without a smile, without the usual warm greeting she'd always give him. "Tell me the truth," she said, cutting straight to the point before he could open his mouth to apologize. "What's going on with you and Jessa?" Ethan leaned forward, his voice low and earnest, careful not to draw attention from nearby tables. "Nothing has gone. Lila, I swear to you, she's my best friend, she's family. Last night was nothing but us hanging out after a long week. She's been stressed about freelance work, and I was just running a hand through hair, his tone softening into practiced sincerity. "I know it's bad. I get why you freaked out, but you have to trust me. There's no affair, no secrets, no lies." "Then explain." Lila's voice didn't waver. She'd replayed those words 100 times. "I wish you didn't have to lie to her." "That's not sibling behavior, Ethan. That's not a fucking. That's someone who knows you're hiding." For a second, Ethan's composure faltered. He blinked, his tightening, and Lila caught a flash of panic he couldn't mask. "It was a stupid, out-of-context comment," he did quickly. "She was upset that you're mad at her, that you hate her. She felt like she was ruining our relationship, so she said I had to lie about being tired to avoid." "It's dramatic, it's harmless." "It is." Stop talking, layering excuse or excuse, framing Jessa as a vulnerable, over-emotional friend, and Lila as the unreasonable partner letting jealousy cloud her judgment. It was the same gaslighting pattern he'd used every time she'd voiced out before, but now Lila could see it clearly. He wasn't a problem. He was manipulating her into believing the problem. "Okay," Lila said finally, after he'd rambled through a dozen hollow justifications. "If that's true, fix it. Set hard boundaries with her. No more late nights alone in your bedroom. No more casual, intimate clothing left in your bathroom. No more inside jokes and private moments that shut me out. If she's just your sister, she'll risk relationship." Ethan's face fell. He leaned back in his chair, his urgent softness fading in chin. "I can't just do that, Lila. We're on a joint lease. We live together. I can't suddenly freeze her out of my life entirely. That's cruel. She had no family in Portland. to rely on. Lila's chest tightened. This was the first perfect excuse. So your living arrangement is more in peace of mind? That's not fair, he argued quickly. I'm choosing you. I've always chosen you. But I can't abandon my best friend because you're uncomfortable with our living situation. The lease is binding. We split rent, utilities, furniture. It's not as simple as just asking her entire life. It was then that Lila learned the truth of their entanglement. This wasn't a casual roommate setup they could comfort. Their lives were financially and physically intertwined, tied together by a year-long legal agreement to break. He wasn't willing to sacrifice a single ounce of his ease her pain. Before Lila could push back further, her pocket. A text popped up on her screen, bright and unassuming. Hey Lila, I feel terrible about last night. I never to come between you and Ethan. I hope we can all just move past this and hang out normally soon. No hard feelings. The sweetness of the melt razor sharp. A passive-aggressive reminder that Jessa planned to embed it in their lives. Unapologetic. Lila stared at the text, running cold. Jessa wasn't scared. She was confident. She knew Ethan would choose to protect their living over Lila's feelings. She knew she held permanent, daily access to him fully break. Against her better judgment, Lila agreed to attend a casual group house that weekend. Ethan begged her to come, saying it would prove nothing suspicious going on, that she'd see their dynamic with tonic in front of friends. Desperate to be wrong, desperate to salvage the relationship she'd invested years of her life into. The dinner was in quiet deception. 4 mutual friends filled the small dining room, laughing and drinking wine, completely oblivious to the tension thick in the air. Jessa played the harmless best friend all night, passing Ethan utensils, remembering his coffee order, laughing exclusively at his jokes, touching his arm when she stood beside him. No one was overtly inappropriate, but action staked her claim. Ethan leaned into it, too natural. He didn't pull away from her touches, direct their private banter. Didn't agree to comfort Lila. Lila glanced across the table at him, a silent look said, nothing to worry about, like her lingering hurt carrying. By the end of the night, every friend had commented on how close Ethan and Jessa were. Every casual comment chipped away at Lila's sanity. She watched the two of them interact all evening. It's the horrifying truth. This wasn't a one-time or a blurred boundary. This was their normal life. She was in their routine. Later that night, once the friends had left and Lila was standing in the town grabbing her jacket to leave, Ethan cornered her by the door. See, things fine. Overreacted, he said, tired and slightly irritated, one who'd been wronged. Lila didn't have the energy to fight anymore. She pulled her jacket on slow, gaze hard and unyielding. I didn't overreact, performed innocence for an audience. She paused, her voice steady but broken at the edges. This isn't, not even close. She walked out to her car, the warm porch light fading behind her. Seconds after she shut her car door, her phone lit up again. It was another text from Jessa, short and sweet on the surface, but laced with quiet dominance. So glad we got to hang tonight. Loved. Hope you're feeling better. Lila stared at the glowing screen, her throat tightened. The fragile surface balance was completely shattered. There was no more denying it. Jessa wasn't going in. Ethan wasn't going to change. And the quiet war she loved was only just beginning. The morning after the group dinner, Lila woke up with a heavy, clear-headed resolve she hadn't felt since stepping foot in Ethan's townhouse. The fog of shock and desperate hope had finally burned off. She was no longer interested in begging Ethan to see her pain, or waiting for him to volunteer honesty. If he refused to fix his boundaries, she would fix her own rules for him. She brewed strong coffee at her apartment and sat at her kitchen counter, drafting a firm, unemotional list of terms. No more private one-on-one late nights between Ethan and Jessa. No more personal items belonging to Jessa in Ethan's bedroom or bathroom. No more inside jokes, coded texts, or exclusive routines that excluded Lila. Most importantly, Ethan had to start actively creating space for their relationship instead of always prioritizing his roommate's comfort. For the first time, Lila stopped framing this as a request and started framing it as a non-negotiable condition. When she sent the terms to Ethan over text, his reply came fast and defensive. He accused her of being controlling, of trying to isolate him from his closest friend, of ruining his life over baseless jealousy. He insisted he couldn't rearrange his entire household to calm her paranoia, and that she needed to learn how to trust him. His refusal to compromise only confirmed what Lila had suspected all along. He valued the ease of his existing life with Jessa more than he valued protecting her heart. Fed up with text arguments, Lila called him directly. Her voice was calm but unshakable, no longer trembling with hurt or desperation. "This isn't jealousy, Ethan. This is respect. Every time you choose her comfort over my peace, you're choosing her over me. You don't get to have both a secret, intimate dynamic with your roommate and a committed relationship with me." Ethan's tone softened instantly, switching from anger to manipulation. He apologized profusely, promised he would be more mindful, swore he would tone down the closeness with Jessa, but he still refused any real, tangible change. He wouldn't talk to Jessa about boundaries, wouldn't adjust their living habits, wouldn't acknowledge how inappropriate their dynamic had become. Empty apologies replaced actual action, and Lila finally recognized the pattern. Frustrated and worried for her friend, Lila called Mia, her best friend, to vent everything she'd been holding. Mia listened patiently before giving her unfiltered truth. Mia told her flat out that Ethan's behavior was not normal, that no real sibling-like friendship required blurred physical boundaries and constant lies. She urged Lila to stop making excuses for him and stop waiting for a change that was never going to come. Yet even with Mia's clarity, Lila hesitated. She'd invested nearly 2 years into this relationship, built future plans around it, and hated the thought of walking away from something she'd cherished so. This hesitation sparked the first real rift between her and Mia. Grew frustrated that Lila was still willing to bend for a man who refused to fight her, and their conversation ended tense and unresolved, leaving Lila feeling isolated for the first time since the conflict. Alone with her, Lila dug deeper into Ethan's phone habits, noticing a pattern she'd ignored before. He always kept a second, older smartphone hidden in his desk drawer at the table. He never let it, always kept it down, always claimed it was just an old work device he no longer used. Now she realized why he guarded it. His primary phone had almost no incriminating messages because he deleted everything important. The real conversations were hidden away on that secondary. That realization pushed Lila past her. She was done negotiating, waiting, done accepting empty promises. She typed out her final ultimatum, slow and deliberate, knowing exactly how high. She told Ethan he had 30 days to resolve his living situation with Jessa, either find a new place to rent alone or require Jessa to move out. If he failed to separate their cohabitation and sever their inappropriate private dynamic by the month, Lila would end their relationship. Ethan panicked the second he quickly left long, frantic voice messages begging mercy, saying the ultimatum was cruel and realistic, claiming breaking the lease would cost him thousands and afford. He swore he would do better, begged for more time, insisted he loved her and didn't lose her. But Lila, she heard the fear in his voice, not fear of losing her, but fear of losing his convenient. He was terrified of disruption, terrified of ability, terrified of choosing one. As the afternoon to evening, Lila stared at her phone, watching Ethan's endless stream of desperate. She knew her ultimatum came with brutal cost. She was gambling her entire relationship on whether Ethan would finally pick her over the life he'd built with Jessa. She shifted completely, from passive hurt to confrontation. But in choosing to fight self-respect, she'd walked straight into far greater emotional risk. The last message from Ethan glowed on her. Night fell. Thing out. Upon us. Lila stared at the words, her chest tight with cold certainty. She felt it in her bones. He wasn't anything. He was only trying to buy more time. Word spread slowly through their shared circle of friends over the following week. Ethan and Jessa told their polished, sanitized version of events to anyone who would listen. They painted Lila as an insecure, jealous girlfriend who could not handle her boyfriend having a close female friend. They skipped over the half-seen text message, the discarded camisole, every small piece of damning context. To people who only heard one side of the story, their explanation sounded reasonable enough. Lila started noticing the shift at casual group outings. Some friends treated her with quiet sympathy, but others grew guarded. A few even gently suggested she should try to let go of her suspicions, that she was putting unnecessary pressure on Ethan. It stung deeply. These were people she had laughed with, dined with, trusted for years. Now many of them were passively siding against her without ever hearing her full account. Mia remained firmly in Lila's corner, yet the strain between them lingered. Every time Lila rehashed Ethan's latest half-hearted promise, Mia's patience wore thinner. She kept reminding Lila that 30 days would slip away fast, that ultimatums meant nothing if you kept making excuses for the other person. Lila resented the pushback. She wanted validation for her pain, not constant reminders that she might get hurt again. More than once, their phone conversations ended in awkward silence before they hung up. Lila found herself growing reluctant even to call her best friend, and isolation settled heavy over her days. Ethan kept sending reassuring texts. He said he was talking through options about the lease, that he was setting boundaries, that things would get better. But his actions never matched his words. Lila still saw photos posted to group social media where Jessa leaned close against Ethan's shoulder. When Lila dropped by the townhouse briefly to pick up a sweater she had left behind, Jessa was curled up on the living room couch under the same blanket as Ethan, watching a movie. Neither of them moved apart when Lila walked in. No huge, obvious scandal unfolded. All the violations stayed small, incremental, easy for outsiders to dismiss. That was how Jessa and Ethan protected them. One afternoon, Lila stumbled onto what she thought was solid. Scrolling through a shared friend's photo album online, she spotted a picture taken 2 months earlier. Ethan and Jessa stood side by side at a lake outside, their bodies pressed close, Jessa's head resting on his up. The caption read, "Just good friends enjoying the sun." Lila's heart sank. She saved the screenshot immediately. For hours, she believed this photo was smoking gun confirmation of physical intimacy, long before the night of her surprise. When she sent it to Ethan, ready to confront him, his reply arrived. He explained that 4 other people had been standing just outside the camp. The whole group had been huddling against a sharp lake wind. Jessa had shivering, and everyone had leaned on one another's warmth. He forwarded 3 more photos from that exact same outing, showing the full group. Lila stared at the screen, her stomach dropping. She had misread the moment. Jessa seized that opening with hesitation. In a group text thread with several mutual friends, she brought up the incident voluntarily. She sounded bewildered. She said Lila was digging through old photos, twisting harmless snapshots into evidence. She framed herself as a victim of irrational jealousy. Several friends chimed in, telling Lila she knew. In one single misstep, Lila had handed her a potion. Doubt crept in mind. If she could misinterpret that photograph so badly, what else would she have misread? Had she allowed fear and hurt? She replayed the night of her surprise visit over and over. The camisole, the partial text, Ethan's unbuttoned shirt, things were real. Yet after the photo fiasco, she started second-guessing. Mia saw how shaky had become. She pointed out that one misread photo did not erase all the other warning signs. Still, the damage was done. Lila hesitated to bring new accusations forward. Terrified, days ticked down on her ultimatum. Ethan kept saying he was exploring his exit options, but he never shared details. He avoided conversations, only sending short, comforting messages to keep Lila from. One quiet night, Lila sat alone on her couch and scrolled through her library. She pulled up every group picture from the past 21 months of her then. Slowly, she began to notice a pattern she had before. At birthday parties, hiking trips, backyard barbecues, Jessa was almost always present. She stood near nearly every shot. Sometimes she was barely visible in the background, other times front and center. For every date night Lila shared as a couple, there seemed to be another social event where Jessa ought him. Lila had spent so long focusing on the excitement at the townhouse. She had missed how thoroughly Jessa had woven herself into every corner of Ethan's life, long rainy Tuesday. It was not a recent lapse in judgment. It was a years-long pattern. Her phone lit up. Message from Ethan. He told her he had spoken with a property manager about breaking the lease, that progress was slow. He had to trust him a little longer. But after seeing all those old lined up on her screen, Lila could no longer shake the awe in her mind. How many moments across their whole friendship had she overlooked? All while the truth sat hidden right in front of her eyes. The 30-day deadline hung over Lila like a dark cloud, each passing day chipping away at whatever small hope she still held for Ethan to follow through. He offered vague updates about the lease, but never names, never paperwork, never timelines she could verify. Most nights, Lila lay awake, replaying the misinterpreted lake photograph, wondering which of her memories were real and which her hurt mind might have distorted. She craved solid, unarguable facts to end the loop of self-doubt. Midweek, an old mutual acquaintance reached out to her over social media. The woman had briefly rented a spare room in Ethan and Jessa's townhouse 8 months prior, before moving to another city. She messaged cautiously, saying she had seen the tension ripple through their friend group, and felt Lila deserved to know pieces of the timeline no one else had shared. What she sent next changed everything. She forwarded cached screenshots of old group chat fragments she had saved long ago. The messages stretched back 8 months into Lila and Ethan's relationship. Jessa and Ethan exchanged flirty, private banter, spoke of late-night shared beds, and joked about keeping their connection concealed so Lila would not find out. The sister act was a mask they both consciously maintained for outside people. Lila sat frozen at her kitchen table, cold dread spreading through her chest as she read line after line. The affair had not started a few weeks ago on that rainy Tuesday night. It had been going for more than a year. All those weekends, Ethan claimed he was working overtime. All those last-minute plans with Jessa he said he could not reschedule. All the trips he took alone to clear his head. Many of those hours had been spent with Jessa. Pieces clicked into brutal play. The little evasions, the brushed-off worry, the way Ethan always defended Jessa no matter what. It was not overprotectiveness toward a lonely friend. It was him shielding the person he was also romantically involved. She thought of the vacation she had planned for their 2-year anniversary, the weekend getaway she had been saving for. Ethan had seemed excited, yet he kept putting off booking the hotel. Now she wondered if part of him had never intended to show up for it. At work the next day, Lila could barely focus. She sat in the office break room during lunch, staring out the fogged window, going over the timeline again and again. 21 months later. For more than 8 of those months, Ethan had been living a double life. He made future plans, told her he loved her, while carrying on this secret relationship under the very same roof he shared with her. Some of Lila wanted to forward the screenshots to every mutual friend and blow their deception wide open. But another part of her was addicted. Public drama would not erase the betrayal, would not undo the time she had given him. She kept the evidence saved securely on her phone, only for Mia got a shortened version over a quick call. Even Mia, who had braced herself for bad news, fell quiet when she heard how long the affair had. All of Mia's earlier warnings landed heavier now. Lila's whole vision of who Ethan was crumbled. He was not merely a weak man swept up in blurred boundaries. He was a deliberate liar who had juggled 2 women. That evening, Lila drove slowly past the townhouse. Rain fell again, the same Portland autumn drizzle from the night of her surprise. Warm light spilled out the ground floors. She did not stop, knock. She circled the block twice, watching. Seeing the building no longer made her angry, such as hollow. This house held all the quiet lies. Later that night, rang. Ethan's name flashed the screen. Lila hesitated and answered. She intended to confront him with a timeline, to force him to admit how long the Over the line, Ethan's voice quiet. He told her he's alone at home, sitting on the couch going over lease documents. He said he was still trying to work out a way for them. But Lila's ears. Faint, distant, soft movement in the background, a mug clinking against a countertop. Then Jessa's voice, low and enough to pick up, asking if he wanted. Ethan did not realize the sound had traveled her. He kept talking, renewing his lie, insisting he was sitting in an empty. Lila held the phone to her ear. Her throat tightened. He was not even trying very hard anymore. Right while he spoke fixing their future, Jessa was in the room with him. All the promises, all the lease talks, all pleas for patience. It was stalling. The revelation of the long-running affair drained Lila of whatever fragile hope she had left. Work pressures piled on top of heartbreak. Her project deadline loomed, and she struggled to stay focused through meetings. Every small reminder of Ethan, a song on the radio, a coffee shop they once visited, pulled her mind straight back to the lies she had uncovered. Gossip had continued to circulate among their mutual friends, and fragments of the drama trickled back to her. Some people whispered that she was falling apart over nothing, while others felt terrible for her. No middle ground existed anymore. She booked a virtual therapy session from her apartment one rainy weeknight. Through the screen, the therapist walked her through the weight of gaslighting, how easy it was for a person to slowly twist your sense of reality over months. Lila finally said out loud what she had been avoiding even to herself. She had truly pictured marriage, shared holidays, a whole life with Ethan. That dream had not been trivial infatuation. It had been real, carefully nurtured hope, and it had been built entirely on deception. Admitting that out loud left her raw and empty. Her friendship with Mia grew strained again. Mia cared deeply, but watching Lila cycle through grief, anger, and reluctant hesitation wore her down. Every time Ethan sent a soft, remorse-sounding text, Lila would waver for hours. Mia could not keep witnessing the same pain repeat. One evening after a long, heavy call, Mia told her gently she needed to step back for a little while. She was not abandoning Lila, but she could not keep absorbing all this heartache. When the call ended, Lila set her phone down and sat in total silence. Now she had almost no one to lean on. Alone in her apartment, she spent hours staring at the wall. Ethan and Jessa, meanwhile, believed they had weathered the worst of the storm. From Ethan's message, Lila could tell he thought the conflict would fade if he just kept giving empty apologies, and waiting for her feelings to cool. Jessa grew older, more comfortable in their shared towns. She slipped up one night, posting a casual Instagram story. The clip showed hot steam rising from 2 mugs of tea on their kitchen counter, soft background music playing. The location tag was the townhouse. The timestamp matched the exact hour Ethan had texted Lila saying he was staying late at the office. It was a tiny, careless mistake. Jessa deleted the story within minutes, but Lila had seen it before it vanished. No one did it. Only Lila understood what that short meant. Another alibi completely. Still, this piece of evidence flow. She was tired of chasing screenshots and hidden clues. Collecting proof would not make the hurt. Rock bottom settled. Some nights she would lie awake until 3 a.m, replaying 2 years' memories, sorting genuine happiness from calculated. She mourned not only boyfriend, but the future she had imagined. She questioned judgment, wondering how she had missed so much. Self-blame crept in, whispering that she should have sooner, should have spoken. Yet as days passed, something shifted. She grew sick of waiting for Ethan to change, sick of waiting for him to choose her. He would never. He liked having worlds, the stable, loving girlfriend, and the comfortable secret life with Jessa. He had no real motivation to. Sitting by her apartment window, watching rain streak glass, Lila pulled up her notes application. She was not writing to shame Ethan or send proof to her friend group. This was eyes only. She began typing out a clear timeline, reading every lie, every false alibi, every warning. She logged the cached screenshots, the deleted messages, the Instagram slip-up, the half-visible text on it. She wrote down dates and details, anchoring herself to hard facts so she would never again doubt what. Outside, Portland's night stretched. Her supports had pulled back. Ethan still sent messages mixing regret and quiet pressure, trying to ration. Jessa stayed safely at all. But Lila was no longer waiting for apologies or grand gestures. The external support was mostly gone, yet her inner resolve hardened. She would stop centering her life on Ethan's choices. Buzzed. Another from Ethan. He said he thought he might have found a workaround for the lease, and begged her to give him time. Once. She did not reply. She kept her gaze fixed on the list she was building in her notes app. She knew now that any workaround he ought another delay. Whatever move he made next, she could not let herself get pulled back into the old cycle. Lila woke the next morning without the familiar knot of anxious anticipation that had haunted her for weeks. She no longer refreshed her messages waiting for Ethan's big announcement about the lease. The 30-day ultimatum was drawing near, and she already knew he would not deliver the real change she had demanded. Hope had burned out, leaving cold, practical clarity in its place. She did not have new powerful allies, no sudden windfall of money, no secret witness ready to blow everything open. All she had was the evidence she had gathered in her notes app, her steady job, and her own small apartment. Those were the only tools she could rely on. She left for the public library early, carrying her phone and a portable charger. There she printed copies of the saved chat screenshots and her hand-typed timeline. She stored the physical papers inside a plain folder, not to broadcast everything to their social circle, but so she would never again be tricked into questioning her own memory. If Ethan tried to twist facts again, she would have something concrete to ground herself. Mid-afternoon, Ethan called. His tone was different. Gone was the desperate begging of earlier weeks. He sounded tense, uneasy, almost rattled. He noticed Lila had stopped pushing him, stopped arguing, stopped firing off angry messages. Her withdrawal unsettled him. For months he had navigated her hurt with apologies and delays, and now she was no longer giving him emotional reactions to manage. "You've gone quiet," he said over the phone. "Are you still thinking about us?" Lila kept her voice flat and calm. "I'm not spending every day waiting for you to fix things anymore. I'm figuring out what my life looks like without you, in case your lease solution never comes." That answer shook him. He had expected tears, anger, pleas, anything except quiet acceptance of a possible break. He quickly shifted gears, cycling between remorse and sharp irritation. At one moment, he would say he hated her. The next, he would accuse her of giving up on their relationship too easily. Lila did not rise. She refused to fight. Every heated argument only gave him space to twist the. Later that day, Lila dug a little deeper into the lease situation. Through casual conversation with the former housemate who had sent her the chat screenshots, she learned critical new details. Breaking their joint townhouse lease would trigger heavy early termination fees. Worse, the landlord would hold both Ethan and Jessa equally responsible for the full remaining rent if one person bailed. Neither of them could easily absorb that financial loan. That was the real core of Ethan. It was not only loyalty to Jessa, it was fear of... Understanding this removed the last of Lila's... Ethan was trapped by his own choices. He could not cast Jessa out without ruining his own forces, and he could not fully commit to Lila while keeping Jessa under his roof. There was no magic. Ethan grew more anxious as days onward. He sent mixed signals stop. Some texts were soft, nostalgic, recalling happy dates. Other messages turned defensive, hinting that Lila was being... He was grasping for any emotional trigger that might pull her back into old patterns. Lila read them all but rarely replied. She guarded her mental empty carefully. Mia sent a short text. She was still base, but she told Lila it was a lifeline, yet Lila knew she could not lean on her best friend for every hard moment. She needed to stand steady on her feet. One evening, Ethan texted Lou. "Can we meet face-to-face one last time? Just us. I need to talk to you in person." Lila stared on her screen. She wondered what this final really meant. Was he finally ready to confess the full truth? Would he admit the affair and accept responsibility? Or was this a manipulation? Another chance to spin excuses, to tug at her sympathy and buy himself more time to keep his double life intact. The power balance had shifted. No longer was Lila begging for or change. Now Ethan was the one reaching out, chasing her attention. But she could not tell if his request came genuine regret or simple panic at the thought of losing her for good. She sat on her couch, the folder of printed evidence on her coffee table, and weighed whether the meeting. Lila agreed to Ethan's in-person meeting, but she went in differently than she would have weeks before. She no longer arrived desperate for closure or clinging to the hope that he might finally choose honesty. She arrived grounded, folder of printed timeline evidence tucked inside her bag, steady enough to hear whatever he planned to say without unraveling. They met at a quiet neighborhood coffee shop away from their usual downtown spots, a neutral space with no mutual friends nearby, no audience to perform for. The afternoon light was soft and gray, typical Portland fall, and the shop hummed with low, distant chatter that kept their conversation contained. Ethan looked exhausted from the second he sat down. The practiced calm he usually wore was gone. His shoulders were hunched, his eyes tired, and he fidgeted constantly with the rim of his coffee cup. He didn't open with apologies or soft nostalgia. He jumped straight to stress, admitting the pressure of the lease had been crushing him for months. That was where Lila finally heard the full, unvarnished truth he'd hidden behind excuses. Jessa could not afford the townhouse rent alone. Her freelance design income was inconsistent, barely enough to cover her car payment, insurance, and personal bills. Without Ethan's steady salary covering half the rent and utility, she would be homeless overnight. The early termination fees were massive, and the landlord would hold both of them financially liable for the entire remaining lease term if they broke it early. Ethan admitted he'd been trapped. He'd started the affair 8 months into Lila's relationship because living in such close daily proximity with Jessa blurred every line. He'd kept it going not just out of attraction, but out of guilt, fear of financial ruin, and fear of upending his entire living situation. He'd lied to Lila repeatedly because telling the truth meant losing his stable relationship and destroying his roommate's life and credit score all at once. His confession stripped away every last layer of gaslighting. There was no sibling bond excuse. It had always been a tangled mix of cowardice, convenience, and quiet ongoing betrayal. While Ethan spoke, Lila's phone buzzed once in her. It was a forwarded screenshot from the former housemate, an argument thread between Ethan and Jessa from 2 nights. Jessa had snapped at him for growing, accusing him of letting Lila ruin everything they... Ethan had fired back that she was being unreal, that he was losing the person he loved because of her inability to support herself financially. The facade between Ethan and Jessa was the easy, united front they'd shown the world was on. They were no longer a team protecting a secret. They were 2 people turning on each other out of fear and resentment. Mia texted shortly after, checking. This time her message was firm and unwavering. "I'm with you, whatever you need." The small support reignited Lila's sense. Her best friend was back, full-lined, and Lila no longer felt alone. By the end of the meeting, the power dynamic had completely changed. Ethan was no longer the calm, unbothered partner holding all. He was unraveling, desperate to keep Lila from walking away. Jessa was no longer the invisible, harmless. She was the desperate, vulnerable third party clinging to housing. Lila stood up from the table before Ethan could beg for another. She didn't yell, didn't accuse, didn't beg. She simply told him she would be in touch once she'd processed. As she walked out into the cool fall air, she knew the final confrontation. The lie exposed, their dynamic broken repair. and there was no going back to the quiet, ignorant peace. The final confrontation happened 3 days later, on a quiet gray Saturday afternoon, at the same neutral coffee shop. Lila chose the time and place intentionally, public enough to prevent escalation, private enough to speak honestly without audience performance. Ethan arrived first. He looked drained, defeated, no longer trying to charm or deflect. Minutes later, Jessa showed up uninvited. She'd seen Ethan's anxious texts, sensed the end approaching, and came to defend the life she'd fought to keep. Her presence turned a one-on-one conversation into the final, long overdue three-way reckoning. For the first time ever, Jessa dropped the innocent little sister act entirely. "I love him," she said plainly. "No more soft smiles, no more passive sweetness. I've loved him for over a year. We were here before you were fully in the picture, Lila. You can't pretend this is all one-sided." Lila didn't flinch. She pulled out her printed timeline and screenshots, spreading them gently on the table between them. She laid out every date, every lie, every false alibi, every hidden night. She explained exactly how long the deception had lasted, how many moments she'd spent believing in a future that had never truly existed. Ethan didn't deny a single word. He admitted the affair had spanned more than a year. He admitted he'd manipulated Lila's kindness, exploited her trust, and hidden behind the sibling lie to keep both women available to him. He confessed that he'd known all along he was hurting, but chose convenience over integrity again and again. Still, he tried to justify. He spoke of Jessa's fragile living situation, the lease pressure, the fear of financial ruin. He begged Lila to understand that he hadn't been purely malicious, just trapped in. Lila listened quietly until he finished. Then she spoke, steady and unshaken. "Trapped people make choices," she said. You chose to string me along. You chose to let me build a life around you while you shared your home and your secrets with someone else. Weakness isn't an excuse for endless. Jessa pushed back hard, arguing that Ethan had never been fully happy with Lila, that their bond was deeper, more natural. But her words sounded hollow. She wasn't fighting for love. She was fighting to keep her housing, the only safe routine she had, and watching both of them plead and die. Lila felt the last flicker of her old affection die. She saw them now, two people tangled in fear and selfishness, willing to sacrifice her peace to preserve their own. In a moment, she made her final. She said softly, "I'm not negotiating, not compromising, not waiting for you two to fix the maid. I'm walking away." Ethan's face crumpled. He reached across the table, begging for one last chance, promising to break the lease, to figure me, to do anything. But Lila did. She gathered papers, folded them neatly, and slid them back. The conflict was over. The lies exposed. The relation finished. She walked out of the coffee shop with. Behind her, she could hear the start of a vicious argument between Jessa, the fallout of the secret they'd spent over a year. Outside, the gray Portland wind. The worst pain wasn't the up itself. It was the quiet realization that she'd spent 2 years loving someone who'd never chosen her. The rain returned that evening, soft and steady, the exact same drizzle that had fallen on the night Lila first discovered the truth at Ethan's townhouse. Lila found herself driving down that familiar suburban street weeks later, almost by muscle memory. The townhouse glowed with warm interior light, just as it had on that terrible rainy Tuesday night. Back then, she'd parked across the street, staring at the windows, heart shattered, wondering how much of her life had been a lie. Tonight, she parked briefly again, full circle, but everything inside her was different. She no longer felt fear, no longer felt desperate confusion, no longer craved answers or apologies. She saw the townhouse for what it was, a small space built on secrets, convenience, and tangled fear. It was not the end of her story. It was just the end of a chapter she'd outgrown. In the weeks following the confrontation, the messy consequences unfolded exactly as Lila had predicted. Ethan and Jessa's fragile alliance shattered completely. Constant fighting filled their townhouse. Without the shared secret to bond them, they clashed over rent money, household chores, broken promises, and the guilt of everything they'd done. Unable to coexist any longer, they finally broke their joint lease, paying the steep early termination fees they'd spent months avoiding. Their living arrangement collapsed, and their secret affair collapsed right along with it. They separated bitterly. No longer friends, no longer roommates, no longer anything. Ethan reached out to Lila several times, sending long apologetic texts, asking for forgiveness, begging for a second chance. Lila never replied. She blocked his number gently, without anger, simply to protect her own peace. Jessa never contacted her again, disappearing from their friend circle entirely. Lila rebuilt slowly, steadily. She reconnected fully with Mia, their friendship stronger than before. Mia admired how Lila had walked away with dignity. No public drama, no cruel retaliation, just quiet self-respect. Lila returned to her routine. Work mornings, weekend walks in the rain, quiet evenings in her own apartment. She stopped scrolling old photos, stopped replaying old conversations, stopped mourning the future that had never been. One cool October, Lila sat in her parked car, staring at the townhouse windows one last time. The rain fell the same way it had on the night her world broke. But this time, she did not stay frozen in. She took one final breath, shifted her car into drive, and pulled. She drove forward through the wet streets, windshield wipers sweeping steady. Behind her lay the lies, the gaslighting, the wasted years, the man who'd never changed. Ahead lay clear, empty, unwritten road. She still carried small. She still hesitated slightly before trusting. She still understood break, but she was free. The story did not end with a new relationship, a dramatic revenge, or a perfect fairy tale fix. It ended with something far more full. Lila finally chose. After everything, she was no longer the woman waiting. She was the woman finally driving home to her own quiet, peaceful life.